Hi Tori, I'm going to show you an element of my little program called Develop Your Inner Coach. And I created that program because after working with many families as a social worker, what I realized was that even though we help families to find a solution, what we didn't do was actually educate the families about themselves, so that they had a better understanding of why they did what they did, so that in 6 months' time they didn't have to come back to us with a similar problem. But because the Develop Your Inner Coach element, they had an increased self-awareness of what they were, well, how they came to their conclusions and their decisions that they made in life. So one of these activities that I do with families is called Who is ultimately responsible for everything that you think, say and do? So it's a question that I ask the parents or the families or the people that I work with, because a lot of the times the people that we are working with, they are people that like to point their fingers. They like to blame the local authority or the police or the teachers or the education system. There's always someone else to blame except themselves. So what I realized is that when I start asking this question, who is ultimately responsible for everything that they think, say and do, they have to start really thinking about themselves. And so if you think about thinking is how we communicate in our heads to ourselves. And I can think of the families often that, for example, when their child plays up, is how they think about that really influences how they are going to respond. So for example, a child plays up and the parent could think that this child is doing that because they want to wind me up. But if they really start to take ownership of their thinking, what they will realize, and that is also part of the Develop Your Inner Coach program, is that the child does things for a particular reason. They do it because there is a particular need not met. But that is the other part. So saying is how we communicate to other people. For example, when, let's say, there's a parent in the car with the children in the back and there's a police driving by and the parent goes out, oh, those coppers, or whatever, those pigs. And it's all about raising the awareness of how am I communicating with who around me, and how will that influence what is happening around me. And the other thing is, who is ultimately responsible for what we do? Because whatever action we take, there is a consequence for that. So this is part of the program where parents really start to explore. I have to say, in the beginning they don't like me, because I'm taking away the one thing that was really helpful, that they could point their fingers at other people. But here they are actually really starting to realize that whatever they are thinking, so how they are talking to themselves, and what they are communicating to others for what they say and for the actions that they take, the consequence for what they're thinking, saying and doing is actually that it will lead them to their current situation. And often when we are working with the families that we are working with, their current situation is a situation that they're not happy with. They would like to see it changed. And up until now they're not happy with it because it's the fault of that person or that organization. But once we start to do this, I get the parents to a place where they admit or take ownership and say, yes, ultimately I am responsible for what I think, for what I say and for what I do. Even though, there are times when they say to me, but Eric, there is stuff happening in my life that I can't control. And I say, yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. But what is it that you can control? And then they realize they can control what they think about it, or they can control what they communicate to other people about it, or they can control what actions they're going to take based on what happened to them. But that is not an easy thing to change. So here, they're not happy with their current situation. What they really want is a new situation. They would like things to be different. And this is the funny thing, is that when I work with the families or the parents, they have no problem telling me what it is that they no longer like. They have no problem telling me is what they no longer want. But what they do struggle with is to identify what it is that they do want. So before we go and take this, well, a step further, there is a really important thing that I need to discuss with the parents, and that is, well, they want a new situation, but what does that new situation look like? So in other words, we need clarity. If they only know what they no longer want, they're going to go round and round in circles. But if they have clarity about something, then it becomes a lot more easier for them to go in that direction. So the first bit of time that I will spend with them is to really get a clear picture of what their preferred future would look like. But then how do you change, because lots of these people that we work with, how do we change the habit that they've got? Often they are reactionary people. They're not very proactive people. They react to what is happening to them. And that is where I developed what we call, as you probably know, when you see this, it's the pause button. The pause button, I always say to the parents, I've got one here. And as soon as I need to press the pause button in my life, I press it. Because what does the pause button do? And this is what I try to train the parents in, is that something happens to you. Normally they would go to their instant reaction, like, oh, but they just react. They just say whatever comes up in their mind, and they just go in a place where it leads them to their current situation. But now we have worked with them and we have explored their new situation. They know now what it is where they want to travel to. So this is where the pause button really comes in. So the same things will happen to them. The children might do things that will trigger them, or organization might treat them in a way that will trigger them. But we're going to educate the parents to press that pause button and ask a really important question. And this question is how I am going to think about this situation, or is how I am going to communicate about this situation, or is how I'm going to react to this situation, is it going to get me closer to my new situation? If it does, brilliant, then we go on. But if the parent is honest and takes ownership and says, the way I'm thinking about it right now, or the way I'm communicating to other people about it right now, or the way I am reacting to things right now, it's not getting me to where I want to be, then we have to take ownership and we have to say to ourselves, what is it that I would need to change about the way that I think about something, or how I communicate to other people, or how I take action. I remember a particular case where I worked with a team, and this team really had a problem with the management, how the management was sort of talking to them. They really struggled that, and I managed, because this team was basically pointing the finger at the management team, and I helped them to take ownership of how they were thinking within themselves about what was going on. But most importantly, I helped them to really ask themselves, how am I communicating to other people about this? And this is where the team started to realize, is that when we start talking to each other negatively about the management, it creates an atmosphere, it creates a culture that is really unpleasant. And how I'm going to act on what I feel inside. And it really led to this sort of gossipy team, this really negative team. And they started to take ownership. And this is the most beautiful thing, whereby they were not dependent on management to change. They had ownership of what they could change within themselves. But going back to the parents that I work with, they need to ask themselves, is how I'm thinking, communicating, doing, is it getting me closer to this one? And if the answer is yes, then let's go and do it. If the answer is no, then ask yourself, what can I do differently? And sometimes parents say to me that, often the families that I work with are rebellious, and they say, things are working, or, I don't need change. And I ask another helpful question. I don't know if you can see it, but it says here, is what I'm currently doing working? And I remember this father that I work with, who called his child not by his name, but he called, sorry for the words, but he called him a fat fucking dickhead. So, and the father was really wondering, why is my son so rebellious? Why is my son not playing part of this family? And it took me a little while to get him to the conclusion that how he might be communicating to his son, what he might be thinking about his situation, because what he was thinking was, that's how I was brought up, and I turned out okay. Well, the reality was slightly different. But after about 2 or 3 weeks going back to this, suddenly it clicked in him, and he started to change what he was thinking about it, because he was clear that he wanted his family to be a unit. And as long as I kept his eye on what the new situation was going to be, and asked him what he should be thinking, saying and doing to get there, and him pressing the pause button many, many times, I remember the day when he came to me and he had like a twinkle in his eye, and he said, Eric, it's amazing, I just shifted something, and I could see a massive change in my son's life, in our family life. And it was great to see that a guy, he was like one of the big guys, for about 35 years of his life, he lived a certain way, he fought a certain way, he did a certain way, but he took ownership and he started to change. He had an increased awareness of self, and that leads to massive positive change. So this is just one tiny element of the Develop Your Inner Coach program. I hope you had enough to see of me. This is not a natural setting. I'd like to walk around the room. I'd like to connect to people. I'd like to respond to what's going on. But I hope it was enough for you to see who I am. Again, I would love to come in, meet with you and chat about what you guys do, so I can learn about you. Hopefully we can talk over the phone further. See you later. Take care.